Welcome back to the Medicine Podcast. My name is Mimi, and I have my love, my king in this life and all others with me here.
What is going on, everybody? We are so stoked today. We have a household name for most medicine listeners.
Household deity, if you will.
A deity, right. Yeah. John Wineland in the house. Welcome to the Medicine Podcast, my friend.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you have been at the top of our podcast bucket list for many years, and cool. Your work, I haven't shared this with you yet, but your work has had such a profound impact on me and our relationship for sure. We were childhood sweethearts, married very young, 23, 24, married for 3 years, became completely unbalanced, zero tools for healthy communication, no understanding of the masculine and feminine dynamic, nothing. Grew up in an evangelical Christian church where if you love God, you'll be good as a married couple. So we found out that's actually not true. And 3 years into marriage, we separated and divorced, unfortunately. We spent 3 years apart. And in that 3 years that we were apart, in 2018, I attended your first women's workshop in Santa Monica.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
And it was absolutely life-changing. I do not use that term lightly. It absolutely changed my life and got me on this snowball of, oh my God, this knowledge exists. It honestly felt like a light bulb was turning on, like a secret to the universe almost. It was equal parts. I'm so intrigued. I love this so much. I'm fascinated. I need more. And also like almost angry that we aren't taught this from a young age, just going into any sort of relationship. Yeah. And so I left that workshop, that experience, being in your presence and seeing how you teach and embody and hold this balance of masculinity, strength, holding the container of, there was probably 35, 40 women there. Yeah. That's a lot of energy to hold.
Yes, it was.
And, on the other side, you're freely and openly talking about really deep feelings and your own feminine side and everything like that. And once I witnessed that, I left that experience knowing deep in my soul that I was not going to be fulfilled in relationship unless I had that type of consciousness, what I termed at the time a John Wineland man. And I didn't know at the time that it was going to lead me back to my ex-husband, but that work really set me on that path to heal myself. And then when we met up 3 years later, we were these bright, shiny new versions of ourselves and really fell back in love with that pure expression of who we were as teenagers when we fell in love. So thank you so much. I can confidently say that your workshop and your work, your gifts to the world have changed the course of my life, our relationship. Yeah. And I firmly believe that this podcast would not even exist had I not found you in 2018.
Well, thank you. That's a cool story. It's a really beautiful story. I'm glad you guys found your way back to each other. That's really sweet.
Yeah,
for sure.
So are we.
Yeah, and just it's been such permission for me as a man to realize like gentleness is not only okay, but it's a strength, and that's something that I suppressed for the first 27 years of my life was this gentleness, this stillness that even though it may not be productive, is powerful. And so I'm so grateful for your permission in that. Well, let's kick it off. Let's get into the good stuff. One question we love to ask every guest on the medicine is, what do you love so much about your life? What aspect do you love so much about your life that you wish you could gift it to every human?
It's a good question. Okay. Because I've had this incredible range of life experience, I think that's what I would want to gift to everybody is just the incredible, like we were talking about college in San Diego, from, being clueless and, drunk on Mission Beach to being a father and all my daughter's life and death and all of the things, which also happened in San Diego. Just the incredible range of life experience that I've had. I would want to gift that to every human.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
The mundane to the spiritual, the, ecstatic to the heartbreak, I mean, I have just had this incredibly full life. And I would want that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Full of the ups and the downs, the light and the dark, the negative, the positive, all of it frames the totality of humanness that we're really able to learn our lessons from, is what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah. Yeah. And also too, just to be able to have, to be able to have the experience of being just a regular human, a guy, an 18-year-old skateboarding down the boardwalk in Mission Beach, to, teaching hundreds of people spiritual intimacy. I mean, it's just I never saw this coming, which is so funny. I never saw this life coming. And I'm really grateful that I've had all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm grateful that you have too. We did a pre-recorded intro for you. Our listeners are very aware and probably exposed to your work to some degree. We've certainly quoted you enough times on this podcast that's so centered around conscious relationship. But if you could give, a brief 1-minute elevator pitch of what you do in the world and how you help people. What's your gift to the world currently as it stands today, before we get into the rest of our questions around masculinity and relationship and all that?
Okay. It is very hard to encapsulate, right? I would say that I teach, conscious relationship. I teach people how to embody consciousness and love, and then use that as a tool for creating a deeper sexual energy, deeper intimacies, deeper understanding. And part of what I end up doing is helping people unwind the patterns that they've kind of grown up with and taken on throughout their lives, and then reinstall new patterns of embodiment and, ways to transmit love and ways to transmit consciousness that hopefully are healing and empowering, and and then can be a light for the world, right?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. It's a lot of unlearning and then relearning on purpose. Like, what do I actually want to create in my life? What do I actually want to create in my relationship? I think so many people are moving throughout life and their relationship, certainly thinking that it kind of just happens to them, when in reality, there's a lot of unlearning that sometimes needs to take place before we can actually acquire the tools and start embodying what we do desire in relationship. And I feel like that's such a switch of empowerment when someone first becomes aware that, like, oh, I can create what I want. Now, what are the tools that I need to do that? And you help people do that in such a beautiful way.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, and this is part of what I say, I think is the first page of the book is, I know men want to love well. They want to lead, they want to, love powerfully. They want to have, they want to make impact. And I would say, stretch that out. All humans want to relate deeply, have powerful relationships, and nobody really taught us how. In fact, we were likely taught, unless we were just blessed with the best parents on earth, we were likely taught the wrong ways to approach, deep intimacy. Longevity, our parents, mine not so much, but maybe yours, but generations, were taught longevity, stay together no matter what, take care of each other. But in terms of depth and real connection and spiritual intimacy, we weren't taught that.
Yeah.
I was going
to say, do you feel like we have so many options in this moment to distract ourselves, and we have pleasure at our fingertips constantly?
Yeah.
You think that there's a level of that, almost like silence, a level of that seemingly emptiness or boredom that would then conjure up this more like initiative to make change instead of the awareness that we want to change. But we're like, how much does the numbing and the distractions that are at our disposal constantly play into our inability to take the real plunge into being productive?
Well, I think it's huge, especially for men, right? I think men are much worse than this than women, as I see, right? And again, when I speak masculine and feminine, men and women are just easy to use, but we're talking, across all humans and all gender types. But distraction, especially for the masculine, has been a huge issue, and numbing has been a huge issue. And so we're faced with, do I want the challenge and the, burden of relationship, or can I just numb out and watch porn and, whatever else, and a lot of men are literally, stuck in that place.
Yeah.
And so I think that the heroic decision that I see more and more men trying to make is, okay, I want to feel.
Yeah.
I want to not just feel my own emotion, but I want to be sensitive to my environment, to my partner, to my family, to my community. And that's the cultivation of sensitivity, meaning like a ninja is sensitive, right? Not necessarily the ability to express emotion. People always confuse that, but sensitivity is a yogic and meditative practice.
Subtle energies,
nerve openings, movement, breath, they literally make us more sensitive. So you can feel what's happening, when he can feel the fluctuations of your heart, or your body, because he's so tuned and sensitive to your body, that occurs, I'm sure, as a kind of love, like a very deep kind of love. And the lack of that sensitivity is, causes all kinds of problems, which is a huge piece of what we saw in Me Too. Like, guys not knowing when a closure was a closure, like, oh, she said yes, but her body was just like this, right? Yeah. So not being sensitive is also a huge problem. So numbness is the enemy of sensitivity.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. Oh, couldn't agree more, which is a perfect segue into speaking about just opening up the dialogue around your new book, From the Core, which I was so blessed to get an early copy from your team and started just diving in immediately. I literally wake up, looking forward to learning more from this book, because it's so needed in our world right now. I know that people have been begging you for years for a book. I've heard that, in different spaces or on different podcasts, like, when are you going to write a book? Right. But I think it was really divine timing because of everything that's going on in our world. Like this was the perfect time, and this was the perfect subject. And so with that, you discuss this in your book, this psychosocial definition of masculinity in our culture. Can you dive into that? What is that psychosocial definition? What do you mean by that? And why is it important for all of us to understand at this particular time in our world? And then piggybacking on that, what is this new definition of masculinity that we're being invited into?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that there's been we could go back to the, 1,000 years and start to see the cultivation of the masculine, right? The cultivation of the masculine as dominant, as warring, as acquiring, as dominating, powerful. And so basically men were considered more masculine the more that they won, for lack of a better term. The more they won, they won at seducing a woman, they won at a sporting event, they won at on the battlefield, they won in business, right? And the more that men won, the more they were, this sort of masculinity became attached to them. And so what I'm hoping what we've come to assign as masculinity is a doing, right?
Yeah.
Doing masculine things. And what the new paradigm of masculinity, I'm hoping, and what I'm seeing, I mean, this is happening, without this book, right? This book just hopefully helps clarify some things. But what's happening is it's more about the transmission that is masculinity, and it's not male centric. It doesn't have to be.
Mhm.
right? I've seen many women get up and transmit groundedness, depth, consciousness, um, uh, width, right? And just the traits that actually occur as masculine. And we can tell this because I see it in workshops all the time, right? I see it in workshops where the stiller and deeper and more grounded a man gets, the more relaxed, the more turned on, the more open, and the more safe the feminine feels.
Mhm.
And so I like to define this masculinity as a transmission, just like femininity is a transmission. And as such, it's not something that it's something we can cultivate. It's something we can actually pay attention to. It's something we can bring choice and consciousness to, because not all the times that I want to be, masculine. I mean, you can just take the term masculine out and just call it conscious and present.
Yeah.
Just call it conscious, present, grounded, and deep in the moment.
Mhm.
So I think that we're in this phase of redefining this now, where we're getting to choose. Men are getting to choose, like, do I want my expression, my consciousness to be reflected in the world as what I acquire or what I win at? Or do I want it to be, how I be,
Yeah.
right? How I transmit. And that I think is the title of the book, From the Core, is that this new transmission comes from the center of our bodies, the center of our hearts, the center of our consciousness, and the center of our breath, hopefully.
Yeah. I feel like there is, and you mentioned it in your book, there's this rumbling, there's this desire for this change, for this exfoliation of the default mode masculine programming that so many of us have been groomed to just unconsciously embody. And I don't know where we're at collectively, but it seems like, at least in some of the circles that I'm able to witness, probably not indicative of the population at large, but it would suggest that we're to the point where we're like consciously incompetent. We're conscious of what can happen, we may even be able to recite some beautiful definitions of divine masculinity, but then when it comes to like stepping back in the door after a 10-hour workday and you're sitting there with your significant other and you go straight back into being your father, and like there's still these groomed runs, right? And like, what is it that's going to kind of like step us into that phase of like conscious competence? And maybe it's similar to, maybe you're doing Joe Dispenza type work and you're like, taking psychedelics and you're trying to shuffle your default, mode network in your brain. But like, what do you think what's going to be the next nudge, the next like emphasis to get this collective curiosity, maybe even partially conscious, into just competence?
That's a great question. I like the way you frame that too. I think this is where the feminine comes in, right? Because a great pain point for men that I see is this lack of capacity to meet the feminine that has been, for a large part, growing much faster than we have, right? In the last 50 years, right? Women have gotten more conscious, there's more women in personal development, women are going to start making more money than us. Women are, don't need us for children. I mean, there's all kinds of things where women are surpassing us. And so our value as lovers, as partners, has shifted quite a bit. Like I think I call it in the book, the myth of the good husband, right? If I make enough money, I take care of the kids, I'm a good father, she'll be happy.
Right.
Well, unfortunately, that's just the fucking ante right now. Like you need that to get in the door.
No doubt.
And so now you need that, plus you need these new currencies of presence and play and consciousness and embodiment. So I see that women are demanding more of men in general. The feminine in general is demanding more of the masculine. And I see that will be the impetus, right? That's what I notice. Like, guys will show up because they're feeling I want to make her happy. I just don't know how. Or I want to find a woman that, I can truly love deeply, but I don't know how. So that's the impetus. The actual mechanism of shifting the depth of our patterns and our karma takes way more time and way more practice than most men in particular understand. We want to hack it.
Yeah, right.
Hack it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I get it. There's a lot going on in the world, but depth can't be hacked. And depth requires the 1,000 hours or the 10,000 hours in order to shift the patterns of your family, the patterns of culture, the patterns of your childhood, the patterns of epigenetics. All of those things takes a lot more effort than most men realize.
Totally. We're so, and you talked about it earlier, we're so focused on outcome. We have such an attachment and an expectation of outcome that we miss out on the present moment. We miss out on the awe and the bliss of now, which is where the learnings take place. Which is where the downloads take place, and where the attachment to an outcome is separated, and you can actually start to pick up on the senses that you're talking about. What does my intuition sound like? You can't hear it when you're obsessed with getting a result, when everything you look at is a transaction. So it's hilarious. You're trying to work on your relationship, yet you're looking for the 5 to 10 step protocol that's going to give you the transactional outcome that you need in order to be masculine.
Right. Which is not where your dopamine comes from, by the way. Right. So this is what they've determined, that the dopamine hit, the actual high of achievement, happens in the process of achievement, not the actual achievement.
Right.
And so we're going to feel a lot. And I think men are starting to put this together. So breath, embodiment, presence, right? All of these things that are the process of making her heart bloom open in happiness and bliss, right?
Yeah.
The real fulfillment, let's call it, comes chemically, spiritually, emotionally from the process of it. And you're right, letting go of the outcome of it.
Yeah.
This reminds me of something that I've heard you talk about, and certainly in David Data's books, he talks about these shells that we acquire as men and women, both masculine and feminine shells, not related necessarily to gender. But in his book, Dear Lover, he paints this picture of a feminine who is acquiring masculine shells from a patriarchal society just to move through life, just to function. And they serve a purpose at the time, but they get so enmeshed with us from an early age. And certainly this applies for men too, acquiring different shells that you're talking about, unlearning and reprogramming what we've learned in our culture.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, some of these shells we acquire at such a young age that it almost feels like it's just us, that it is our personality. So whether we're talking about the feminine or the masculine, how do we start to distinguish from a shell and from our actual essence that, we're all existing on this spectrum of masculine to feminine? How do you help people distinguish between those shells and our essence?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the distinction I would make, and look, I trained with David for many years, but I do not speak for David. We actually disagree on a lot of things around this stuff. But but I do think this idea of shells, I would like to talk about, the way I see it is patterns, right? That we're rewarded for certain patterns. Like I think what David talks about is the girl that's rewarded for achievement, right? And then how she realizes that, that the achievement gets love from her family, but then when she wants to attract a more masculine essence human, that doesn't do it, right? Achievement doesn't necessarily do it. So the way that I like to think about this is, once you start to move, you do the practices, you start to move the body, you start to open, especially for women, you start to connect to pleasure, you start to connect to love, and you start to express the sort of the pulse, the universal cosmic pulse of love through your body, right? Once that starts to happen, your patterns become evident, right? The way I see it in a lot of women is control, right? To try to control. Men do it too, but I see it a lot to control, human interaction in a certain way, like needing to be safe before they reveal their heart, for example, needing to feel safe before they reveal their heart. So you start to see these patterns of let's call them, control is not necessarily the right word, but it's almost like a pattern of conditions, right? So I will love when, or I will open when, or there will be enough love when, that happens, right? And almost always when you identify what the condition is, you can trace it back to a pattern and to one of those places that you put on a shell. And then you can start to unwind it, not just using embodiment work, but therapy, other modalities that people use, medicine and other modalities that people use to kind of help unwind the body mind. So if you're focusing on the pulse of love and you're really working with that, everything that's not that will start to become very evident. Very evident. For example, like if you're just sort of working on being love and embodying love, and opening your heart and giving, transmitting that, which is what I would call femininity, right? Transmitting the pulse of pleasure and love, to your partner, but some like old fear comes up, like, oh, it'll be too much for him, or he'll reject that, right? It's just,
am I too much?
Yeah. Am I too much? Okay. That's the shell being revealed, right? That's the wound, the pattern being revealed. And so now how can I be the pulse of love and pleasure while having this tender, somewhat fearful heart and stay connected to him? So as you get more and deeper into practice, the little hot spots of trauma just pop up like the whack-a-mole, and then you can breathe through them and relax through them and have sex through them and love through them, and that to me is the most pleasurable way to work with those things. Identify them, Totally. Because they're really clear in the moment.
And something that you're saying, the pulse of love is, in my mind and in my experience, it's not just one body towards the other body, but it's actually me towards me. And feeling that first, like one of my, I would say, greatest life lessons, and especially in us coming back together, was realizing that in part one of our relationship, I did not treat myself, or I can say now, like really love myself. And obviously that manifested in different ways in our relationship. But I think that that's something that is not talked about enough, is that it starts with us and feeling the pulse of love towards ourselves first, maybe not so much shame and judgment and guilt, but starting maybe with like curiosity and compassion for those shells and patterns that you did acquire as a little girl or a little boy and have carried into adult life. I feel like when self-development is kind of on that foundation of curiosity and compassion rather than shame, judgment, and guilt, it seems like that development just goes so much further and deeper, rather than, coming from this place of, let me just flog myself for this.
Or fix myself. Well, so I would even take it one step further, is that the pulse of love is the divine. You could argue, and I would argue, that the pulse of love is the divine feminine that all humans have, right? The more we're embodying it, in the flow of it, feeling it, the more we're in our feminine, right? And the field of conscious awareness that is also all of us have, right? The more we're in that, embodying that, the more we're in our masculine. And so when we can bring consciousness, this sort of meta awareness, like the great I behind, the great witness behind the witness, so to speak, right? And the feeling of love and sensitivity, when we bring those together, we're in the deepest moment of practice. And any moment of practice can be that. And when we're in those deep moments of practice where the pulse of love is flowing through and your heart is full, your body is full, but you're also aware of the great infinite essence of things, and self disappears, right? Self relaxes.
So true.
Yeah.
Self disappears. And those are the moments that we're, wanting to, I think most humans are hungry to cultivate more of. I mean, that's why people show up at my workshops, because they might not even know it. They intuit like, oh man, I could love so fully that I disappear.
Yeah.
And you can. And they do. and those are the life-changing moments I think that most of us are wanting more of.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, we feel that when we're in this work and in what we call our, almost like the third, that is the relationship, and it is the removal of self. And it's this service to this divine exchange of bliss and pleasure that is the relationship, not like codependent, which is what our marriage looked like, where we had this gaping hole on one side and this gaping hole on the other, that when we were dating and got married sort of fit and fronted as a complete being. But as we changed and as we grew, the gaping holes began to show up and look like they're no longer collaborative in any way. And I think where that's at now is that as we become more whole individually, we're able to just contribute to this formula that creates a third, that creates something that sort of transcends the physical. And even if we can't articulate it or spell it out, or I sure as hell can't coach my way into somebody experiencing it. Yeah. But it's something that's tangible and it's real, and it is this connection to God or divinity or at least something outside of the 3D. But yeah, that it totally resonates for me. And something we've talked about a couple of times is like senses, and being in tune with your senses, not only for discovering your feminine or discovering your masculine, but then how numbing interferes with that. You mentioned porn earlier as a numbing mechanism. Are these the things that are keeping us from being able to pick up on where our innate masculine and innate feminine essences sit?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it just numbs it's a surface level. I mean, you could also talk about it as dopamine addiction.
Yeah.
Right? The neuroscientists are talking about dopamine addiction. So not just porn, but check the phone, right? Scroll. For me, look at financial markets. You see people who are older watching news all the time.
Yeah.
Right. There's literally there's this lack of capacity to be with the depth of the present moment, how we feel in the present moment, what we're experiencing in the present moment, what else is happening, coming through in the present moment. And that's kind of a chronic modern, I think it's built over the last 100 or so years, right? But it's peaking now. Yeah. And I think because pretty soon we're going to have the fucking virtual, you know what I mean? And what are we going to do then? Yeah. So we're gonna, so anyway, I agree with you that there is a sense of numbing, and until it gets so painful that we're having to look at the patterns, because the desire to numb is a pattern to escape.
Yeah.
Or a pattern to what I see with a lot of men is that it's kind of like a hungry ghost to just get more experience, more like just experience, right?
That's such a good descriptor. God.
Yeah. And women too, right? But men in particular, like experience, and that's the feminine. So the more that men are consuming experience, right? Even good experiences like deep ayahuasca journeys, or you know what I mean? But they're basically lost in the feminine. And I've certainly been guilty of this, and my teachers have pointed this out too. So that's why so much of what I talk about in the book is to be able to maintain a tether to consciousness while in experience, the experience of sex, the experience of, the world, the experience of love, all of those things. And that's what separates, I think, us just being in different experiences from us actually maintaining a masculine ground.
Yeah.
That makes sense,
So what can we do, like Like I'm ready to end this when we get done with this podcast, like start the practices, I'm ready to make improvements. How can I work on this? Besides just like, all right, I'm going to stay away from, porn, alcohol. I'm going to watch my hours on technology, but like, what are some ways that you're telling people, men, how they can start to build this muscle back? How can we recover this muscle and ability to sit in the present moment?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's really simple. I mean, it's so simple that most guys are like, I did this, I have a virtual workshop that, I've got like 500 people in it, and I do calls once a month. And this was the thing yesterday of belly breathe, like slow, deep, long belly breathing.
Yeah.
It changes your brain chemistry. It changes, where your hormones, it grounds you. It slows your nervous system. It makes you more sensitive. And so just to be uber simple here, right? To start with not chest breathing, but belly breathing, and just make your belly into this big ball, 10 seconds in, 10 seconds out, longer if you can. And then from there, just spread your awareness 360 degrees down into the earth, up into the heavens, around you. And it becomes quite blissful. I mean, you want to talk dopamine, it just starts immediately kicking off serotonin and dopamine, and you start to feel better, and you start to be more like fulfilled in just what's already here. You don't need more experience. It's like an addiction to comfort, an addiction. I called it an addiction to comfort in the book, but I really think it's an addiction to experience. That's a big part of it, right?
Yeah. And I think for so many, and myself included in this as well, we're thirsty to make change, to make improvements. So we'll go to a workshop, we'll read a book, and we're done with it, and we're ready to just hit the ground running. And we blow our load. Just immediately. Yeah. And it's so funny because we're actually attempting to find presence and slow down and deepen and ground. But we get so amped up on the potential outcome of getting better that we forget everything we just learned and are ready to blow our load. Like, I think it happens often. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it is a sign of just interest, but that how quickly you can lose track of what you're learning, falling back into old patterns of like, I'm ready for the outcome now. I'm ready for the result now.
Yeah. Well, it's like any art, right? Like if you went to a yoga weekend, and your body opened, and your nervous system opened, and you got really like, you got stronger, and then you stopped doing yoga every day. And 6 months or a year later, you went to another workshop, you'd be sore. You'd have to kind of start all over. And so, or like any art, whether it's a musician, whether it's tennis, whatever you want to call it, right? So embodiment is basically the art of your body.
Yeah.
It's the art of using your body to transmit deeper qualities than just whatever the fuck we've been transmitting, which is, give me more hunger, right? Like we're good at transmitting hunger, right? But I'm full, like I'm so full of love that I have plenty to just give.
Yeah.
Right? Or where we transmit fear, but we don't actually, stop and go beneath fear into tenderness or compassion. And so this requirement to go deeper than we've been trained to go does take time. And like you're saying, it takes reps.
Yeah.
Dudes will understand that. It takes fucking reps to get strong in this area. Right?
Yeah. It's something, I was just reading in your book this morning about these different roles or responsibilities, I think is the word you use. You kind of frame it in this way where you're sharing this sort of pain point from men where it's like, I'm doing all this work, I'm putting the reps in, as you're talking about right now. And she's not necessarily doing the same work on her consciousness, on integrity. She's not staying true to her word. She's kind of just dumping her femininity, her emotionality on me, and am I just supposed to stand here and take it? And I think that that's probably, a really common question from men is looking at like these differences between just how the brain chemistry works for a masculine and a feminine. Yeah. Can you speak to these different responsibilities for the masculine and feminine when it comes to inviting more consciousness and depth to the relationship, and how are those two responsibilities different?
Yeah. Well, it's really confusing, right? Because women also have the same issues. Like, why am I not feeling him more? Why is he not sharing his heart with me? Yeah. Why does he want TV and freedom more than the relationship, right? And some of it has to do with just our natural proclivities as masculine identified humans versus feminine identified humans. So the feminine responsibility in relationship is how in this flow of love are we, right? So her responsibility is to be a constant weather vane of how deep am I feeling him? How open is his heart? How much is he in his body? Is he just looping? Is he in acquisition mode to the point where he can't feel anybody? Is he keeping his word? Is he even here? Right. Mm-hmm. And the feminine heart, is this beautiful sort of weather vane that can measure those things immediately. If she's open and if she's paying attention to, if she's not on her phone, like her body has to be open too. And so the reason why I call it a responsibility is because the feminine has to basically prepare their bodies to be the oracle transmitters for consciousness. Is he conscious? Isn't he conscious? And when he's not conscious, the alarm goes off. The masculine responsibility in relationship, among others, I'm super generalizing here, but among others, is to bring depth and to bring presence and to sort of ground the relationship in a direction and a directionality, because the feminine is not directional. The feminine is multi-directional. Now you have a masculine and your masculine's very directional. You can think to what the next podcast should be, right? But the feminine is not directional. The masculine is the masculine gift in relationship is depth and direction and presence, and let's call it the ability to move through space and time as conscious humans, right? Mm-hmm. And so the masculine gift is that. Also, I would argue, and I think I say this in the book, is that the masculine gift to the feminine is to take her deeper into her heart than she could go on her own. Right?
Yeah.
And we need each other for that, right? Mm-hmm. And so the masculine gift can be measured in directionality and depth, just to make it super simple, overly simple, deeper into our hearts, right? And the feminine responsibility in relationship can be to, really be responsive to the energetic love temperature of the relationship. Mm-hmm. And again, super simplifying this. I mean, we can take a whole workshop on this stuff. I probably should.
Go read the book.
That gives us a base.
Yeah. I want to get in this a little bit further. Like, let's just take the perspective of, and you mentioned this a little bit in the book. Women are at this point where it's like they're complete #boss babes. They're CEOs. Their direction is dialed in. Their income, mothers who have the house structured perfectly. And where are men or masculine in kind of this 2022 dynamic of the modern woman, tastefully able to step into the relationship and provide direction to a very carved out masculine that sits in their significant other or their wife or their girlfriend? Yeah. How do they step into that, quite literally in a relationship, even have the conversation of, hey, I'm feeling the need to step into my own masculinity with depth and direction. Here's how this needs to look for me. What are you seeing there?
Yeah, no, that's such a big challenge I'm seeing, right? And it hurts the women in the relationships too, because they're like, I don't want to hold all this all the time. I want to be able, it's painful to hold the house and the business and the children and so the simple answer to that is you have to embody it. For her to trust your directionality, you have to be like we've been talking about. I'm probably going to bore everybody with the come back to the depth of your own breath, the feeling of your own heart. Are you in the center? Are you aware of the center of your body? Are you locked into the present moment? And the more depth, the more that's a much purer form of masculine than the doing masculine that she might be really good at.
Sure.
And eventually she will want to respond to that just because it's so much deeper than her capacity to organize.
Yeah.
So I think one of the ways that men can become more trustable, to use a term that David uses, to become more trustable in this is to really master their own body mind. Right? To master their own body mind and their own directionality. Like, where am I in my purpose? How deeply am I, living in this moment? How am I leading other men? Do other men trust me? Right? Am I contributing to the world in a way that feels deep and important? Or am I numbing out?
Yeah.
Am I numbing out? And the more that we can become like literally matches for a lot of women, a lot of women, like you said, are killing it.
Yeah.
and to match that so that we can be trustable for something deeper is an area that I think a lot of men do struggle with. And part of the reason is they lack the commitment to presence that I think is needed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, this all works really, in a synchronized way when you start piecing these all together. And so much of this is coming back to presence.
Mm-hmm.
That was the perspective of the masculine or the male who is like really interested in getting better. But there's also the cases where, and we see it a lot with our listeners and people that come to us, is, man, so often, more often than not, it's actually the female, the woman, the feminine in the relationship who's picking up on this out of balanced dynamic. And they're like, fuck, I need to get out of my masculine. I need my man to, step into depth and direction.
Yeah.
But they're the oaf archetype. They're numbed.
The man is.
Are they too far gone? So the question is like, how do I enroll them?
Yeah.
And so what are you typically telling people?
I mean, this is such, I had a panel last week with Connor Beaton and Preston Smiles and Stefanos and the questions we got, and we all were smiling because we get them all the time, is how do I get my man to ...
Yeah.
Right?
That is the question.
Yeah. How do I get them to deepen? And the answer sucks, which is you don't.
Yeah.
You don't. There's a little caveat to that. You continually express what his lack of consciousness is doing to you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. It sounds simple and it sounds easy, but most women are not able to do that. Mm-hmm. Like you're at dinner, you guys just had this really sweet moment, and then he picks up his phone. And if you don't go, he won't know that was really painful.
Yeah.
Right. Or, so again, this, to the feminine responsibility, cultivating the body mind that's open and real and feeling very deeply and responsive to that lack of consciousness is the feminine responsibility in relationship. And a lot of women struggle with it, and it's understandable. It's a pain. Why the fuck should you have to do that? But ultimately it probably goes way back. It's not just modern. So the moment she gets directional, I'll try to simplify it. The moment she gives you a book or a podcast and says, oh, you should listen to this guy, who's directional?
Yeah.
Who's the masculine, right? Yeah. So she can't get mad at you for being in your feminine in that moment because she just took the masculine pole. And if that happens again and again and again, what women are doing in this instance, and it sucks, I know, is they're using the masculine structure they've learned post-feminism to solve the problem of their hearts not being met. Mm-hmm. And what that does is it actually pushes the man farther away, because now she's in the masculine telling him what to do, which if he is masculine does not want. Mm-hmm. And so the way to, and again, this is a huge subject, but I'll just simplify it. The way to work with your partner is to express how his unconsciousness hurts you in the moment. And then a more probably just more mainstream healthy way to do that is to talk about your needs. Like, I would need you to have this conversation every week, like what I love about us and what I would need more of. And so you could say to him on every Sunday night when you have that conversation, I would need you to be more in your body, and I need you to actually breathe deeper, and I would need you to slow things down. I would need you to be less reactive. And if you do that for months, 6 months, a year, and he does nothing to move in that direction, you're probably with the wrong human.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. As I've heard you say before, it's like, that's still really good information. That's good feedback.
Yeah.
And something I want to bring up when you,
and then when you leave, let me just say this. When you leave, you can say, for 6 fucking months, I've been saying, I need you to breathe deeper. And like, slow down. This should not be a surprise to you, man. Yeah. Well,
when you were speaking about that specific, example, which I think is so prevalent right now, just the ever present distraction of the little supercomputer that we all have in our hand or in our pocket.
Yeah.
And maybe one of the partners, we'll just use the masculine in this example. You're connecting over dinner. He picks up his phone. When this has happened before, he doesn't do it often, but when this has happened before, I will just like stop talking. And because I don't know if his mom is texting him and it's like SOS 911. I don't know what's transmitting. I don't know if it's a really important work email that he's been waiting for all day. I try to give him the benefit of the doubt and not just go immediately into like, you motherfucker. Like, I was trying to tell you, like, I don't do that. I just get quiet, and he can sense like, oh, she stopped talking, but I don't know if that's a tendency of mine that already exists, I know, from childhood to start to shut down and not be too much, not be like, that it would get his attention for sure. And see, look, he's laughed. So look, he just laughed when you did that. So that's I don't do that. Well, but see, you just did. Okay, but this is a perfect illustration of what I'm trying to tell women sometimes, which is, if you do that and he smiles and laughs, that's a yes. That's a yes. I just got permission from John Wineland. Yeah, that's a yes, right? And so it's a great question, right? How do I know whether I'm being, whether I'm just imposing my will on them or I'm actually right? But if you think about it, when you started talking about going inward, your body actually started to go inward, which is a closure. Oh yeah, I feel that. Yeah. And so if you're closing, then you're probably in a pattern. Yeah. Now you could go, and he'll go, baby, just give me a second. It's my mom, but you're both still open, and there's no, you know what I mean? There's no like weirdness. And those moments, people don't realize, like, those moments add up where you close and close, and close and close. And part of the masculine responsibility, I think, in relationship, and this goes back to your other question, was about awareness. And the masculine responsibility is to check the culture that they're allowing, right? Like, oh man, I'm allowing us to be in this culture where I numb out and then you close, and then we don't talk about it for a week, and then it comes up. And so the masculine gift of awareness is to scan, and this is a tip I'll give to anybody who's masculine in a relationship: stop and scan the field of your relationship, scan the culture of your relationship, and ask, like, are we a culture of complaint? Are we a culture of request? Are we a culture of full expression? Are we a culture of holding back? Are we a culture of, of deep, slow makeouts? Are we a culture of, wham bam? Yeah. And really
take responsibility for the culture that we've allowed. Now, of course, the woman or the feminine in the relationship has as much responsibility, but the masculine gift is awareness. So whoever wants to be in the masculine is the one who should scan that.
Yeah, I love that scanning.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it still comes down to presence. I mean, what comes up for me in just this example, I think reflecting back on when we were married, I think I would have just stayed numb, probably wouldn't have picked up on it. And then 2 weeks later, when we have an argument, it would have been like, you never pay attention, you always bring up your phone. And it would have been just the scorekeeping and then the dump of the tracker that we've all been keeping, plus ones or minus ones on for weeks at a time. In what we call now our part two, just listening to this example, if she's closed, I would pick up on it. I'm significantly more aware. I hope so.
Yes.
But I think I would respond with, what's going on? Are we like an immediate, like, hey, do we need to talk? Versus if she would have done, the expression that she did, I'd have been like, I would laugh and I'd be like, hey. And then maybe like grab her, like, hey, I'm sorry. I'm bullshitting around on my phone.
Yeah.
I freaking love you. I need to be listening to you. Let's talk. Like it would probably be that response, which seems a little more productive versus my like, there's a threat in the environment. There's a threat in our relationship. How can I fix it immediately?
Well, what you're identifying here is pattern, evoking pattern. Right? So her pattern of I'm not going to be too much. So I'm just going to, I'm unhappy, but I'm not going to be too much, even though I'm pissed at him right now or whatever. I feel hurt. And your pattern is, what's wrong? What do we need to fix? Am I okay? Is she mad? And so we're constantly evoking these things from each other. And so her perfect example of, evoked your laughter, right? And evoked an openness that who knows what's going to happen. Maybe maybe you'll like start, like scratching at each other. Maybe you'll start making out. Who knows? But the idea is that we want the patterns we know. Now we can install better patterns and we can get better at pattern interrupting, but the patterns are pretty default. The openness, the chaos of open love and consciousness is unpredictable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Who the fuck knows what's going to happen, right? I mean, who knows how it's going to show up? There might be a 5-minute fight and then 10 minutes of lovemaking in the car. There might be, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's scary for people.
What is also scary, speaking from the feminine and realizing like when you're speaking about like she is the weather vane of the flow of consciousness and love in the relationship and giving that constant feedback, that oracle as you speak to, sometimes it's hard to put words to. I tell him all the time when we're in maybe not even a disagreement, but just maybe a charged conversation or one that's serious in nature. It's like I sometimes don't even have words to put to my feelings.
Yeah.
And then I start judging myself, being like, why can't you articulate the way that he can? And why can't you just like be able to express exactly what you're feeling inside? But sometimes there are no words until, maybe a day later or something. And so what I love about your approach that I'm still learning, and I'm still learning, obviously, how to practice that noise is everyone knows what that noise means, but is there words to, do we always have words to put to that? So any feminine that's listening right now, I just want to encourage you that I'm in this with you. And if you don't have the words to put to, your feelings, like what is the sound? What is the vibration in your body? And if you had to create a noise out of that, so, and this can go both ways. For me, it's been more about in the positive when he is doing something that I fucking absolutely love. And I just feel like so overwhelmed with adoration and love for him. Like I let him know with just or like just letting him know, like, and I also, learned that from the embodiment practice from your workshops and everything. And I think that has great impact. But swinging to the other side, we also need to be able to do that when it's not flowing. And so that's, I'm basically just giving myself a permission slip to actually do that on the maybe not so great end of the spectrum.
Yeah. Be messy with it. Be messy with it, but also be open to, I was with somebody, I don't know, about 3 years ago, and when I did something that she didn't like, it hurt her so much. Like her, even if it wasn't big, like, you know, like I'm not able to get off work till 6, right? And she'll be like, no, and would like collapse to the floor. But I would laugh, and I would be like, oh, it was such a pure expression of the truth of her heart. I would laugh. And it's such a great way to experiment, right? Like to experiment. So when you were talking, what came to me was just pick a word and add it to whatever expression. It could be orange, you know what I mean? Whatever it is. And then he'll know, like, oh, she's trying to like express herself in some way. But at least there's some, you know, container to this stream of energy we call the feminine heart, the wild feminine heart. Yeah. So having some word, whether it's no or orange or, you know, the trick is if it becomes directional, like you're telling him to do something, which is very apropos in many, many moments. But if you do that, you're now stepping into the masculine, right? Consciously. And now that's where there's clashing. You know, don't do that. Does have a different energetic signature than,
Yeah.
Now women will often say, like, why the fuck do I have to go, like, can't he be conscious enough to know not to do that? And it's hard to argue with that. Yes, he should. But, you know, what creates love the fastest?
Yeah.
What creates the flow of love?
Well, I mean, when you're able to see the flame, you're able to know the container that is needed to control, or I shouldn't say control, I should say you leverage this burning passion for something productive. So if you're able to visibly see the flame, even if it's out of control for a minute, masculinity is able to at least identify where the container needs to be implemented. Different from if the flame never shows up at all.
Yeah.
And I think there's this maybe masculine fear about the potential of the flame. And so it's this like preservation to ensure that no flame ever shows up from femininity because it's of the potential of this wildfire. But in actuality, I think it's once that's seen in these little micro doses of the flame, there's at least a register for masculinity to be able to identify, like, here's where depth and direction can actually be effective and create something greater than this out of control fire. Yeah,
you're giving the masculine information. I like to think of weather. If he's sailing your boat to New Zealand and there's no weather, he has no idea how to get the boat to New Zealand, really. You know, but if there's a squall, you know, he knows what to do. Or if there's a storm coming, he can know what to do. So you're actually giving him, your heart is the weather for the direction of the relationship. Now, again, this does not have to be male, female. This can be, you know, this can be switched. There might be times when your masculine is better served to lead the relationship, right? Or in same-sex couples, you know, or non-binary, however, whoever's masculine is going to better lead, they can step into this principle, right? Of being the direction, feeling what the feminine is giving you in terms of, you know, baby, I want us to go to Santa Barbara next weekend and have a no tech weekend. How does that feel? Right? Then you'll read her body, like her body just relaxed at that thought. So she'll give you information and then you can say, oh, okay, great. I'll make the reservations now.
Yeah.
Here's how we're going to do it. Friday night, we're going to put our phones in this tub. They don't open up until Sunday night. And then you constantly can check in with her body about how it's feeling. And that tends to be a really nice way to provide leadership that usually feels good to the feminine.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. That. I mean, everything you're saying. Yeah. All of that feels very good. And something that you touched on a little bit earlier is something that we talk about a lot. And I just led an 8-week course for women called Deep Love. And a big piece of it was learning the art of expressing your feelings without emasculating your partner. You know, Alison Armstrong is big huge on unknowingly, unconsciously, she goes pretty hard at women. Like, you are emasculating him. Do you expect him to show up and ravish you if he's been emasculated for 20 years? Obviously not.
Yeah.
This is a huge thing as well. And so there is this teeter-totter of criticism and complaints, constructive criticism through the movement of your body or just a noise or whatever, that is a little bit of a poke. I wouldn't call it emasculation by any means, but for the woman, you mentioned when you start directing, is that how you, kind of distinguish between the two of emasculation and this flow of energy, letting your partner know where you're at in the moment by moment?
Yeah. Revealing your heart's truth is non-directional, right? So, ouch, orange, right. And if you notice, there's two ways. Once you start to get directional with the revealing of the truth, then now, you're taking charge of the moment, which again can be fine. It can be needed, but just know it's going to have an impact on your polarity. Now you're both in your masculine and you're probably not going to want to have sex for a while. Right. Yeah. So the moment you start laying directionality on it, you stepping into your masculine consciously. That's what Allison would say. You're now castrating him. You're telling him your masculine is better than his. And, again, sometimes it is, sometimes it is. But the other piece, and this is the yogic and energetic piece, is feeling the difference between and Like, one is like a fire hose of energy that is often that I see women and men do a lot, which is this projection of anger that's probably old. Some of it's old, some of it's new. It's all mixed together in this fire hose of energy that men are like doing this with, right? Versus a revealing open, which is like an it's wide. It's actually an invitation for them to step into versus a fire hose that they'd have to fight their way through.
Yeah.
So those two pieces, I think, are really just to help women try to start to practice with this, because it's hard. The last 50 years, women have been taught, assert yourself, use your words, use your energy, state your truth. And that's all perfect in the workplace. Yeah. But in relationship, it's tricky. It's not wrong. It's not wrong by any means, but it does have an energetic impact. So widening open, revealing open versus projecting forward. And then also revealing without directionality. I'm cold. This is a great one, a great example that I've heard David give. I'm cold versus can you close the window?
Yeah. Kind of reveal like your feelings as they arise and let him take action.
Give him the opportunity to take care of you.
Yeah. No, I love that. That's so great.
That's great. Yeah. Really great. In your book, you have this phrase, you say, hold the pose. Hoping you can go into that a little bit. What do you mean by that? And what are some of the like long-term, benefits, especially as it pertains to the masculine?
Yeah. Okay. So in the example I just gave, which is the feminine example, right? So this revealing out, right? If she's feeling dropped or hurt, or right, and there's this revealing of her heart. If in 3 seconds or 5 seconds you aren't responding in the way that she wants, she has the opportunity to either close and go back into pattern, right? Or continue to reveal how it feels now. Like, so she starts revealing, orange, whatever. And you go, what? And then she goes, so now it hurts even more because you're like, what? And then, so it might take 10, 15, 20, 30 seconds of her just holding that pose of an exposed, revealed heart, moment to moment expressing it. But eventually, and it usually does not take long, you'll be like, okay, yeah, I'm sorry, baby, I'm being a dick, or I'm whatever. And so most of us will try, and I hear this all the time, I'll try to be present and hold her storm, right? But it just keeps coming. Or I'll try to be playful when she's upset, and she'll just get more angry. And more often than not, we give up before our presence or our embodied consciousness or embodied love evokes a different response from our partner. And what I do is I'll have men and women time it just as an experiment. I'll say, okay, go home, stand next to her in the kitchen while she's cooking dinner, begin breathing deeply into your legs, plant your feet, soften your belly, like let your heart soften, and just really feel every inch of her. And see how many seconds it takes for her to turn and have a response for you.
You mean physically feel her, not energetically?
No, energetically feel her. Not you don't have to touch her. I mean, maybe you can, but it's like just energetically bring conscious depth and open-heartedness to the moment and time it. Is it 30 seconds? Is it a minute? Is it you know what I mean? Is it 2 minutes? Right? Until she opens and relaxes, and vice versa. I'll say, okay, bring, you're sitting next to him on the couch, and, bring some pleasure and ache in your heart through your body, and time it. How long does it take for him to look at you and see you? It's normally a minute, 2 minutes. It's crazy. And we won't hold the pose to evoke the deeper, the deeper place in our partners, because we're so conditioned for instant response.
And almost, I would say, probably expecting some sort of rejection, or this isn't going to work, or I've tried this before, or she never, or he never. Yeah,
exactly. And so hold the pose means know you're going to get some resistance because they're not used to this, and hold the pose because you love them. And you love love, and you love the openness, and you love this direction more than you're committed to the pattern.
Yeah.
And I'll say one more thing about that. Where the rubber really meets the road is in fights, obviously, right? And so if one partner is just staying heart open and connected, and I love you, baby, and I'm not leaving, and ouch, that hurts when you say that, and just open, eventually the other person's defense will melt. Now, whether that takes 2 minutes or 3 minutes, or, you know what I mean? And obviously you don't want to put yourself in an abusive situation. Right. So there's a caveat there, but more often than not, it's more just heated tempers in relationship and not full-blown abuse.
Yeah.
That becomes, more of a very, like, if he's angry and you're just like, ouch, baby, I love you. Ouch, that hurts. Why would you say that to me? Ouch, ouch, ouch. And you literally tears. It won't take long, unless he's a complete asshole, for him to go, oh, baby, I'm so sorry. Like, all right. And to shift. Most of us don't even know that it's possible to. There's that moment, the tipping point in a fight or in an altercation, where one person's openness can tip the whole fight. And so we default to the patterns that can lead to the evenings of separation, then maybe the days of separation, and then maybe the weeks of separation. And then pretty soon we can't meet each other and we should get divorced.
Yeah.
So
it's, we say this all the time. It's, do the small things like they are big things. Because just that small, like, nope, I'm going to stand here for 1 more minute, and I'm going to open for 1 more minute. That's, in the grand scheme, it's a small thing, but it's really a big thing, because they accumulate, over time. And that's something that I will never forget, because what tore us apart were these very small things. They weren't big things. They were very small things that took us from our core, which was love, to slowly 1% every other day to who are you and what are we?
Yeah. And so I would advise couples to start with that first exercise. Just be stealthy
Yeah.
and show up next to your partner and bring your best practice and see how long time it is. It 2 minutes? And look, is 5 minutes of your best practice worth opening your partner's heart? Come on, come on. Right. And just have them practice it that way. And then when the trauma spaces come, you've got something in your body you can work with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good. And we could talk to you for 3 more hours, but obviously we want to be very conscious of your time.
Thank you.
Obviously, we're going to link all the places that people can go grab your book from the core. You guys, if you want to create an epic relationship, it doesn't just happen. We need to bring more consciousness to the relationship and to our life to really create and experience what we want. And this book will help you do that. Whether you're feminine or masculine, male, female, it doesn't matter. We all need to have these tools in our tool belt. So definitely go grab it ASAP. As we come to a close here, we have a few rapid fire questions that we ask every guest. You can simply answer with one word if you want to.
Okay.
So it's shorter.
Let me prepare myself.
No, not that intense. But the Medicine Podcast is all about exposing ourselves to the medicines, the real medicines that help us develop more consciousness in every aspect of our life. So thinking about body, mind, and relationships, we'll start with your body. What currently feels like medicine for your body right now?
Desert mesas.
Beautiful. What feels like medicine for your mind?
Slow, deep breath.
Always. What about for your relationship or relationships? What feels like medicine currently?
Unconditional generosity.
I love that.
Beautiful.
So good. Yeah.
John, thank you so much, my friend. Nothing but welcome. Absolute gratitude. Your work has completely changed my life. And we're going to keep bugging you to get you back on the show.
Sure. Yeah. I took a little break from podcast for a while, but I figured, the book is a good way to come back. So let's talk again in 6 months or a year. And love to see what you guys are up to.
We'll be knocking on your door for sure.
Yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate you having me, and I appreciate you, your kind words and, and pumping the book. I hope it's helpful.
It is. Sure. It will be for sure. Where can people learn more about you and your work if they're itching for more, which I know they are?
At johnwineland.com. Very easy. I've got programs. Some of them are evergreen. Some of them are live. Some of them are online. Some of them are in person. So there's a big plethora of ways to get involved if they want to.
Awesome. All right, you guys, johnwineland.com. Wine like you drink, land like you live on.
Exactly.
Go check him out.
Thank you. Good, Mimi.
And we'll talk to you guys next time. Go spread some light. Okay, bye.